is entitled Build the Party Forward the International African Revolution. It's the shortest chapter that we will have dealt with in this study series of chapters. Completion of this chapter will have taken us through the entire political report, which was published as a book, Israel to Africa, published in 1991. I think that there's much that we can get out of this this last chapter, short as it is. But what is really important in terms of this last chapter in the entire study is that it shows a real history of the African People's Socialist Party of being involved in solving the problems of the revolution, which is what a revolutionary organization is all about. And that a lot of things have happened in the last 26 years since this political report was written. And the one constant factor in all of the developments of our movement has been, since this was written, the presence of the African People's Socialist Party. And of course, our party is something like 44 years old. And I mention this because there has been a steady hand in the revolutionary process that has allowed us to experience a real continuum. It's not been fits and starts and something happens and incident might occur, that an event might come into play that gives rise to some political organization that has no history, has no tradition, has not even developed a certain kind of political maturity that allows it to be able not only to deal with what is happening, the particular event, but also to place that event in some kind of historical context. And it's what helps us to have a revolutionary movement, a movement that is not based on spontaneity, but is actually guided by revolutionary theory. And this was written, as we said, 26 years ago, but the party is longer than that. The party is almost 50 years old. And the Uhuru movement is more than 50 years old. And I just think it's really important in part because what it means is that for all of this time, we've been able to engage in different kinds of activity on a steady course, and we've been able to test our theory, to improve our practice throughout the years. And anyway, I just think it's really important to recognize that. That's not a small thing, especially it's important to recognize when we experiencing a period where a lot of new people have been drawn into political life as a consequence of how events are affecting people at this very moment. And they've been drawn into political life, excited in some instances, really wanting to do things, but wanting to do something and being excited is not the same thing as saying that one has the experience. And it's really important, this whole notion of having a revolutionary experience, having achieved a certain kind of maturity. The US government and imperialist forces around the world have really done everything possible to make it very difficult for our organizations to last long enough, our movements to last long enough to achieve experience and to achieve a certain revolutionary maturity. And every effort that the government and imperialist forces have made to crush the revolutionary movement of our people has failed precisely because over the last 50 years, the Uhuru movement has been here. And over the last 44 years, the African People's Socialist Party itself has been in place. I just wanted to say that. It's not a small thing. So the title of this chapter, chapter 8, in Israel to Africa, the last chapter, is build the party, forward the International African Revolution. At our second Congress in 1987, we determined, and this is page 111, at our second Congress in 1987, we determined that our main task was to build and consolidate the party. Today, we still consider building the party to be our primary task, but the party is the instrument for revolutionary leadership. However, when we speak of building the party today, we are capable of more clarity concerning what that means. Today, it is clear to us that our party has taken on the basic theoretical work that is necessary to push our revolution forward. Our theory, especially regarding the real origin of capitalism, the elaboration of the theory of primitive accumulation of capitalism, will also contribute to the forward motion of the revolutionary process worldwide. This is without a doubt. We have either solved or pointed the way toward a solution of the fundamental theoretical questions necessary for revolution. And I just want to say this is not a small thing, because most of the revolutionary activity in the world has been influenced tremendously by Marxists, by Karl Marx himself, by people who've created organizations that they believe represent the ideas of Karl Marx. And that has been the case, notwithstanding fundamental problems that we run into in real life in terms of trying to fit what has been characterized as the Marxist analysis into the struggles that we've been involved in. In many instances, what we've found is dogmatic utterances of people who have become quite studied in terms of what they've learned from books alone, and not able to apply that to the reality that we're confronted with, or attempting to force the reality that we are confronted with into some fixed formula that is characterized as Marxism. And it hasn't worked. And they have come up with very bad explanations for why the majority of African people and many of the other people have not been influenced by these Marxists in our communities where we are. And so this question of how capitalism came into being, which is something that most of the Marxists have not been able to truly deal with, and that includes Karl Marx himself, who was a very brilliant man and who did, put forth this whole idea about primitive accumulation. He's not the only one who's ever done it. Wasn't the first person who did it. He was the first person, perhaps, who called it primitive accumulation. But the point is that at the time Marx wrote, at the time he lived, African people and other peoples who were not really close to Europe or not European were considered as sort of footnotes to history, that we were not real factors that they could understand. Karl Marx made the statement that this primitive accumulation, which was the accumulation of capital that preceded actual capitalist production and actually was a starting point, he was able to say that on the one hand. But then he mashed up a whole bunch of other stuff that happened in Europe and put it in the same category as primitive accumulation. And then the primitive accumulation that he talked about and the way he talked about it was not something that was significant to the people who constituted the primitive accumulation itself. He spoke about primitive accumulation as something that happened in history that was important to Europe. In fact, he was speaking to it as European history. Primitive accumulation is something that forwarded the development of European history. He didn't say, in other words, the history and resources of the vast majority of peoples around the world were significant only as it related to the development of Europe. So not as it related to the actual devastation of Africa, of the Americas, what we now refer to as the Americas and other things like that. And so there were people who call themselves Marxists who have used Marx's formulations in order to explain the world and have imposed those formulations on African people. And to the extent that Africans and others accepted this definition, we couldn't see our own existence. We couldn't see our own significance, independent significance, and describe our historical trajectory as significant unto itself. What is the meaning to African people of becoming what Karl Marx referred to as a warrant for the commercial hunting of black skins? This was something that he spoke of as significant to the development of Europe. But what did that mean for Africa? What did that mean for Africans? This is something that was missing. And so what we say, and that's because Europeans were subjects of history. They were subjects of history. Everything revolved around white people and Europeans. So that was the starting point. That was the template. And although Europeans were a minority of the people on the planet Earth, everything was defined as it related to this minority. And so what we're saying is that we are a significant being, and we're thinking human beings, and we can explain our own existence, and we come to better conclusions when we were able to do that. Anyway, that's what we're saying in terms of our theory, especially regarding the real origin of capitalism. And I say this because Marx's formulation for the development of human society created a trajectory of human society being at its most primitive stage, one that he would characterize as primitive communism or primitive communalism, no exploitation, no oppression, etc. And then it goes through this hierarchy of development that would take human society, and he's defining mostly Europe. White people is what he's talking about. He's characterized human society as white society. He doesn't say white society because it's understood that human society is white. It was understood. And so now you have this thing he calls human society moving from primitive communism or primitive communalism, if you will, to slavery, and that was slavery of white people in Europe, and what we now define as Europe, through feudalism, and then from feudalism to capitalism, and this is the trajectory that was created by Marx in terms of how society developed, how capitalism came here because of internal contradictions inside Europe. Inside Europe, what we now call Europe, that led to this thing called capitalism. So we say our theory, especially regarding the real origin of capitalism, the elaboration of the theory of primitive accumulation of capitalism will also contribute to the forward motion of the revolutionary process worldwide. This is without a doubt. We have either solved or pointed the way toward solution of the fundamental theoretical questions necessary for revolution. Therefore, it is clear that the question of party building today is no longer essentially a theoretical question. It is essentially an organizational question. This was something we were saying 26 years ago, and we continue to struggle with this question in 2016 and near the end of 2016. Today, we are confronted with the real task of organizing the party itself. 1, of organizing the masses of African people into the party. 2, of organizing African people into the mass organizations of the party. 3, of organizing the African people within our colonially oppressed community itself. And 4, of organizing the African Socialist International within Africa and throughout the world. That's sort of a specific statement of what our organizational tasks are, what they were then, what they continue to be. In addition, we have created an organizing strategy which raises up the leadership of and responsibility of every member of the party, and which will identify the exact points within our party structure and within the US where party building will be concentrated. Moreover, the centers of all the party's mass work must become our massed organizations. The centers of all the party's mass work must become our mass organizations, which, in addition to deepening the process of building a reserve force for our revolution, also organizes the people, bring them into political life, enhances their fighting capacity, and contributes to our task of bringing into organization every house, block, community, campus, job, and prison wing where African people are located. So this is what we're looking at. We're saying that the mass work, that the centers of the party's mass work must become our mass organizations. Our mass organization, of course, we're looking at, directly and immediately, we're looking at NPDM, International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. We're looking at the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. We're looking at the kind of other kinds of mass organization and mass work we do. This is where the centers of our mass work are concentrated. And this also should highlight the significance of cadre, of having cadre who can lead mass work, because this is where the party's revolutionary mass activity is centered. It's right here in these mass organizations. And so that's why people should not take the issue of mass organizations very lightly. It is these mass organizations are the vehicles through which the party provides leadership for masses of people who are not necessarily in the party. But that means if that's going to be the case, then there has to be cadre capable of providing that leadership and willing to provide that leadership. That means learning everything necessary and continuously struggling to make that happen. So, and it says that part of it defines the objectives of bringing people into political life, enhancing their fighting capacity, and contributes to the task of bringing into organization every house, block, community, campus, job, and prison wing where African people are located. And while we've been dealing with this struggle here in St. Petersburg, revolving around the renaming of the street for Tyron Lewis, somebody who was killed by the St. Petersburg Police Department some 20 years ago. It was really interesting that as we were leaving the ceremony that we just had, reaffirming the renaming of the street, different people were greeting us, and one woman greeted me and she asked me if I remembered her, because she and her sister, when they were little children, would join the marches led by the Uhuru movement, and they'd be in the front and they'd be dancing and cheering and what have you. And that would have been, almost 40, maybe 50 years ago. And there are other people throughout this particular city, which makes a statement about the significance of enhancing the people's ability to struggle. That's one of the things that's relatively significant about the city of St. Petersburg, where we're located, is because there's more than 50 years of consistent, non-ending struggle of some sort. Sometimes high level of struggle, sometimes low level of struggle, but always here, always struggling and what have you. And over the years, what is happening is that there's a certain capacity for struggle that has been created in the city. The demonstrations, the actions, and of all kinds, which have been going on. And so there is in this city a real heightened capacity for struggle that might not often be seen in a lot of other places where we're located. And I'm saying this about the significance of the kind of work that we do on a regular basis and why mass work is so important, why working through the mass organization, bringing people into mass political life. And among the things that it does is it enhances the ability of the people to struggle. And that's why we had such fierce disagreements with the formation that used to call itself the All African People's Revolutionary Party, or that it used to exist to call itself the All African People's Revolutionary Party, because it has had as a matter of policy non-struggle, no struggle. I mean, they did, you know, an African Liberation Day once a year. They would do that, and they just studied all the time. And that doesn't do anything to enhance the capacity of the people to fight, to struggle. It doesn't mean the revolution is going to be made today, but it does mean that we develop over a period of time just a greater capacity and willingness of people to struggle. It's like somebody who's going to be a boxer, and all you do is sit around and read about it all the time. The first time you get hit in a real situation, then it's a real problem for you. So people have to have, you know, have to engage in sparring and doing a whole bunch of other stuff to actually become better at what it is that they do. On page 112, there continues to be some debate within the general anti-colonial movement as to whether our people within the United States have lost our national identity as Africans, becoming new Africans, or some other variation of African American, because that's what New African is fundamentally. There's even some suggestion that our idea concerning a worldwide African revolutionary movement is philosophically idealistic and impossible to realize. We are clear in the African People's Socialist Party that the question of our nationality and the real feasibility of the creation of the African Socialist International is no longer a theoretical question. Those theoretical questions have been left unresolved, that which have been left unresolved by Garvey and Nkrumah have been resolved by African internationalism, the ever-developing theory of the worldwide African revolution under the leadership of the African working class. I think it's important to deal with a couple of things here. And one is the debate of whether or not we still Africans and et cetera. And there are all kinds of silly arguments that are put forth that would determine that we're not Africans. And most of them truly, even when they are clothed in some kind of theoretical garment based on the fact that a lot of African people who are no longer in the continent have become addicted to Kool-Aid and stuff that is here, and they don't want to leave that. These are usually intellectuals. These are usually middle-class Africans who feel like they have some stake here. Majority of African people really don't experience in a practical level any stakes here, except where their grandmama live across town. That's something that might cause a bit of heart flutter. But in terms of, you know, like some real love and affinity, stakes in America, that doesn't exist. And to the extent that it does, it's a consequence of the influence of the African petty bourgeoisie who inundates our communities with sermons from pulpits and who have been our instructors in classes and who have been the ones who make silly movies and sitcoms that would have us loving America. But, you know, that's like sugar. You know, people can become addicted to sugar. It's no good for you. And even though it tastes good while you're addicted, at the moment you get off of that stuff, it becomes clear that it wasn't something that you needed. And I think that's generally speaking how the majority of African people are. And so, and the other thing that's really important about this is one of the reasons that you know the significance of the theory of African internationalism is because we know about Marcus Garvey. And we know about 11 million Africans worldwide who really were connected to the Garvey movement and the assumption of Africa for Africans, those at home and those abroad. I mean, it's not a theoretical question. We've seen it. We've seen, or we're aware of the fact that there are 11 million Africans. We're aware of the fact that under most adverse circumstances in the 1920s, when lynching was the national pastime in this country and throughout the world for African people, where there was no internet and the means of communication were much more primitive. But Garvey conducted in 1920 a convention in New York City that had from 25 to 50,000 people from throughout the African world attend that, with the assumption that we were going to create a whole new life, a new world, and Africa was going to be the center of that world. And the other thing I want to say is this: if a group of white people can declare from Russia and Germany and England and the United States that Palestine was their national homeland, and that they can go and steal that territory and then resurrect a dead language called Hebrew, which had not been spoken for, I don't know, maybe 1,000 years, and then make themselves Israelis. Clearly, the notion of millions of African people forcibly dispersed from Africa itself, and there's nobody questions whether Black people come from Africa, except a few African petty bourgeoisie. Clearly, then our claims for African identity and African nationality can stand any kind of test that anybody would honestly want to utilize. So we are clear in the African People's Social Party that the question of our nationality and the real feasibility of the creation of the African Socialist International is long a theoretical question. The problem before us now is not a theoretical question, but a practical question. Or in the vernacular of our oppressed communities, we might say, ain't nothing to it but to do it. This work to build the African Socialist International will be the central focus of our revolutionary work. It will occur under the slogan, easily related to Africa, appropriated from the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania. This work is distinguished from Pan-Africanism, which has historically relied principally upon the leadership of the African petty bourgeoisie as heads of organizations or illegitimate colonialist created states for the accomplishments of its aims. And ours will rely upon the social base of conscious Africans organized under the revolutionary leadership of the African working class. We said under the revolutionary leadership of the African working class. We didn't say simply under the leadership of the African working class. We said under the revolutionary leadership of the African working class. And there's a big distinction there, because the party is the advanced attachment of the African working class. It is the party that will help the working class understand what its mission is in history, and call it to arms, and help to develop the organization that will provide, that would give it the capacity to achieve its historical mission. Thus, as a mobilizing tool, we have declared at this Congress, this is the third Congress, 1990, that this is the era of the worldwide African revolution and the socialist unification of Africa and African people under the leadership of African workers and poor peasants. We must take the question of Africa, its relationship to the structure of the capitalist world economy, and our relationship to it, to every African community in the world. This is important for 1,000 reasons, but Africa is suffering with no obvious relief in sight. Our people suffer from Cape to Cairo, from Morocco to Madagascar, as the saying goes. Africa, so rich in natural resources, is being ground down by poverty and a general state of wretchedness. Throughout Africa, we suffer from curable diseases, and guinea worm regularly incapacitates huge sectors of our population in West Africa. Our people on the continent of Africa have been besieged by imperialist induced biological warfare in the form of the AIDS virus, which is estimated to kill 75 million Central Africans in the next few years at present rates. And by the droughts, so-called droughts, created by colonialist domination of our agriculture, which ruined our soil and killed millions of Africans every year. All the social indices which measure the quality of life tell a dismal story in Africa. Infant mortality, lifespan, which in some areas is in the 40s, actually less than the 40s. Homelessness, jobs and production, trade, etc., all promise even greater misery for our people. Presiding over this state of affairs in almost every instance are neo-colonialist stooges whose loyalties are given to their neo-colonial masters, often in the form of the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. And I just want to mention this because some of you may know that the Pan-Africanists right now, many of them are infatuated by the idea of creating what they call the sixth region of the American Union. And that this is their way of some kind of progress for African people, that we become a sixth region of the African Union, which is itself a creature of imperialism, which is itself something that was consolidated in part of the struggle against Nkrumah's efforts to really unite all of Africa and African people, which is a neo-colonial entity. That's what it is. That's all it is. And so we say that that this is an effort by the Pan-Africanists to become a part of a neo-colonial entity. It's got nothing to do with winning freedom. It's somehow being able to have your own flag attached to a neo-colonial entity like the African Union. The lives of our people are also filled with other forms of, and it's not a struggle against the IMF. It's not a struggle against the World Bank. It's not a struggle against the British and the Germans and the US and all these forces that dominate Africa today. It's somehow you just want a seat at the neo-colonial table. That's called the African Union. The lives of our people are also filled with other forms of violence, much of it political, such as that normally and traditionally inflicted upon the people as a condition of neo-colonial rule. This neo-colonialist rule facilitates the maintenance of the powerlessness and poverty of the people through an unending transfer of Africa's resources to Europe, North America, and increasingly Japan. And of course, those who are eating of the flesh of Africa, it's grown even greater since this was written 26 years ago. These neo-colonialists have also sold Africa to their imperialist masters as a dumping ground for radioactive materials and other toxics that Europe and North America find too dangerous for internal disposal within Europe and North America. Our rainforests are also being sold to the Japanese, Europeans, and North American imperialists. Even as our people suffer from a lack of housing and firewood used for fuel because imperialism will not allow African industrialization, barges loaded with timber from our life-giving forests are being loaded for delivery to lands most Africans will never see. Struggles involving competing sectors of the African petty bourgeois neo-colonialists, such as Nigeria, Chad, and Liberia, and between the colonialist created ill-formed states such as Senegal and Gambia, are costing the lives of thousands of Africans who only want the capacity to produce and reproduce real life, such as experienced by the peoples in the imperialist countries. In other places such as Angola and Mozambique, imperialists hired African thugs posing as revolutionaries or legitimate independent representatives of the people, are massacring thousands of our people and deliberately assaulting the barely significant dependent economic infrastructures of the territories in order to keep us enslaved. In Southern Africa, the radical petty bourgeoisie of the governing Zimbabwe African National Union that we supported during the anti-colonial national liberation movement has sold out the revolution, leaving the masses landless, impoverished, and under violent suppression by the state. In occupied Tanzania, a sector of the petty bourgeoisie organized as the African National Congress is moving full speed ahead to duplicate the Zimbabwe model, easily laid to Africa, and the masses of African workers and poor peasants and Africans throughout the world must remind all our national oppressors and class enemies that this is the case. Between this Congress and the next, our party must concretize our African Socialist International work by moving to organize at least one international meeting of African forces to win them to participate in the African Socialist International. And if possible, we must pull together the African Socialist International itself. Our ESI work will require other work and development that we will continue to discuss during and immediately following this Congress. However, we will finally establish within our party the organizational apparatus that will give a strategical approach to our African Socialist International, work. In our second Congress, we laid out the need for this in the following passage from the political report. The party's quote, "The party's international work must acquire an organizationally and politically strategic character. Organizationally, we must establish an Office of International Affairs to be responsible for the conduct of the party's international political strategy. This office must have as a strategic aim the political isolation of the US government and political recognition of the Black liberation movement under the leadership of its advanced attachment." I don't know how many folk understand this, but it's the kind of work that we've been doing in the party all along. The thing is that we exist in a world not independently from other countries and other peoples, and there are a lot of contending countries and peoples. They have their own political interests and what have you. It's really important for us to understand that and to be able to develop strategies and what have you that can recognize the contention that exists even among our oppressors, so that we can use this contention to our own benefit. I mean, that's what we talk about when we say political maturity and experience. Talk about being able to do that. And so anyway, this office would work under the leadership of the Central Committee, would also lead the party's work to build the African Socialist International, which is the strategical key to the permanent defeat of world capitalism and the liberation and unification of Africa under socialism. This Congress cannot adjourn without addressing the question of occupied Tanzania or South Africa. Currently, our oppressed sisters and brothers are striving to bring down the most blatant form of capitalist, colonialist exploitation and oppression remaining on earth. We must reaffirm our commitment to participating in the revolutionary process in occupied Tanzania and in the movement within this country which attempts to consolidate a liberal bourgeois review of the struggle of occupied Tanzania and which strives for a liberal bourgeois solution. So we're saying that we did, the African People's Socialist Party, we participated in all of the debates. We were in debates in this country around whether or not the Africans would even accept this negotiated settlement. We were in the thick of the debates around that question. We were opposed to it up and down the line. And also we felt like it was necessary to involve ourselves in this struggle that was happening in this country too, led essentially by liberals and sometimes radical liberals that would define what the struggle in South Africa was all about, what the struggle in occupied Tanzania was all about. Because what they wanted to do and what they succeeded in doing in large measure was to define the struggle in South Africa in a way that they defined the struggle in this country, which was simply an attempt by African people to get the same privileges that white people had in South Africa without challenging the nature of the social system itself and the fact that there was such a thing as South Africa, in part because Africa had been illegitimately split up and Africans separated from each other. And we felt like it was really important to try to participate in these struggles, in these questions, in these movements. We helped to build an important sector of the movement dealing with the question of South Africa. We did that. And because we have a responsibility to try to define what that looks like, what that means. So, and moving further, we said, finally, we must say that we must continue to struggle to defeat the U.S. counterinsurgency. We've talked about the counterinsurgency. We still suffer from the counterinsurgency, though right at this very moment, we're in a better place than we were a few years ago. But the counterinsurgency is real. And the counterinsurgency is those efforts, is that program, that campaign, that strategy that is designed to push Africans back from a process of taking our freedom, winning our freedom, or defeat that movement once it has achieved the ability to actually fight and take our freedom. And that counterinsurgency has included the arrival of the Jesse Jackson, Sharpton, the Farrakhan's, and all these other forces as substitutes for a genuine revolutionary movement that was killed with King and Malcolm and Panthers and other forces that were involved in revolution. So someone told me they were at a conference of the 50th anniversary of the Black Panther Party in Oakland, California, and Bobby Seale, who had often been characterized even by Huey P. Newton as a co-founder of the Black Panther Party, was quoted as saying that what the Panthers were really interested in doing was not revolution, but to create a situation where Black people could effectively run for electoral office. This is how it had been characterized. That's counterinsurgency. That's redefining this reality and trying to undermine the capacity of African people of actually making a revolutionary movement, an insurgency to take back our freedom. So a basic component of this struggle is to expose and wage the defense of the national democratic rights of our people. A basic component of this struggle, that is to say, to defeat the counterinsurgency, is to expose and wage the defense of the national democratic rights of our people. For all practical purposes, we must build a mass democratic movement. And this anticipated, this was 1990. 1991, we went into Chicago and we built the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement as we built the National People's Democratic Uhuru Movement as a US-wide entity. This is different from the last period of struggle, where the struggle for democracy was led by the liberal African petty bourgeoisie. This is different. The success of the democratic rights struggle by the liberal petty bourgeoisie is what consolidated the neo-colonialist strategy and robbed the African petty bourgeoisie of their capacity to lead this movement. In other words, we're not talking about something like what happened before with the petty bourgeoisie who led the struggle for democracy, because the only thing that did was consolidated the neo-colonialist strategy. And it also, their role in this, the African petty bourgeoisie, robbed them of their capacity to lead this movement that we are talking about. And I was just talking the other day about the role of liberal imperialism in the struggle for African people, because a lot of people are concerned and frightened by Donald Trump and what they assume is reaction and quote unquote conservative kind of politics. But if we look at it, what we will see is that neocolonialism is a function of liberal imperialism. In every instance, liberal imperialism. Imperialism otherwise moves to kill and crush and destroy the revolutionary movement outright. Blow it up, shoot it down, kill it like that. Liberal imperialism is what has rescued it. It was Eisenhower, the so-called non-ideological president, Republican president, and when he, in January of 1961, when he was lame duck president, January 1961, concocted, along with Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy, the liberal Democrat that was coming, had won the election for presidency and coming into power, that concocted the whole vicious war that resulted in the assassination and murder of Patrice Lumumba. Kennedy had a direct hand in that. Kennedy, the liberal imperialist, the Democrat, is the one who created the Green Beret, which was to be this ability of the U.S. imperialists to fight these other kinds of wars, low intensity warfare that was designed to crush movements and struggles without necessarily having to amass large forces to take them on. Kennedy, and then Johnson, and some people say that this is part of the contest inside the ruling class in this country that led to Kennedy's assassination by somebody inside this country, by forces that had great differences. And don't look surprised or think surprised, but look at what's happened to Petraeus. Petraeus, the general who played an important role in waging war in Iraq and Afghanistan, had a strategical approach that went against what the traditional military wanted to do. And so he ends up being kicked out because of some scandal that somehow he was sleeping with, while married, sleeping with this woman and sharing some kind of secrets. And here is the military that's murdering people all over the Middle East. And we're saying that that's all right, but don't sleep with somebody else, and it's nonsense. But anyway, the point is that these kinds of contests happen inside the ruling class and inside the ruling class state, who's going to control everything. And it was Johnson's, under Johnson, the liberal icon, Democratic Party force, that we saw the assassinations of Malcolm X, the capture of a wounded Che Guevara, his assassination, the overthrow of Kwame Nkrumah. And this is liberal imperialism. And in the place of, in almost every instance, they put their forces in power. That's neocolonialism. That's neocolonialism. And that's happened essentially under liberal imperialism. So, let's see where I am. So we say that the success, that this time the task of leading the struggle on page 115, this time the task of leading the struggle for democracy also falls upon the already overburdened shoulders of our revolution. There's a difference, however, and that is essentially this. Unlike the liberal African petty bourgeoisie, our revolution, under the leadership of the advanced detachment of the only force capable of leading it to its conclusion, will raise the right to self-determination as the highest expression of democracy for our people. This means that we will not only fight for democracy within the context of already established bourgeois democratic rights as defined by law, but we will also fight to build a popular movement to expand the concept of democratic rights for our people. You with that? That's how you can put up a sign and say, this is what it is now. That's part of what you've got a whole mass movement now associated with the Black is Black Coalition, Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations that's fighting around the question of what? Self-determination. That's pulling hundreds and perhaps thousands of Africans in this process that we're involved in around the question of self-determination. That helps to understand exactly what the hell it is that we're doing for those people who think that we come up every now and then with a new scheme to do something, that this is part of a trajectory that's tied to a strategy of actually overturning our oppression. We will struggle to build creative organizational forms to facilitate this work. And we will also call upon the African People's Solidarity Committee to initiate and participate in campaigns of its own, as well as those built by the party, especially for this purpose. And again, the Black is Black Coalition can be seen as one of these creative organizational forms to fight for self-determination, despite the fact that we got all kinds of definitions within that organization of what self-determination is. The party has played this role of carrying out our strategic aim and raising the issue of self-determination as the fundamental question that the African liberation movement should be dealing with. But the struggle for democracy represents only one aspect of our work. The key task remains the task of building the party. The key question of building the party is organizational. In Oakland, we advanced the concept of struggling for democracy above and socialism below. By this, we mean that we must create the organizational form which will allow us to organize the broadest possible support for the national democratic rights of our people. You got that? The organizational form, this will allow for the broadest possible support for the national democratic rights of our people, while the struggle for socialism below requires us to build the party and party-led organizations, campaigns, and structures directly among the African working class, fighting for democracy above and socialism below. These party-led organizations, campaigns, and structures among the people give our revolution its practical capacity. The concept of struggling for democracy above and socialism below must guide our entire work within the U.S. Prison of Nations. The organizational forms we create must facilitate the process, and our cadre training must be conscious of the need to better prepare party members to take this on. The main resolution for our first Congress in 1981 was entitled A New Beginning, The Road to Black Freedom and Socialism. We said of our party building then, quote, if we of the African People's Socialist Party live up to the high ideals of African internationalism, if we live up to our commitment to our people, making the firmest possible assault on our enemy, if we build our party building process and develop a program which meets the general overview put forth in this main resolution, the days of U.S. imperialism are surely numbered, and the new beginning we are embarking on will signal the liberation of our people from this despised U.S. colonialism, the unified development of a critical and cataclysmic international socialist awakening, and the end of the U.S. imperialist-led world of ignorance, poverty, brutality, and misery, unquote. We have been able to say that our analysis of the origin of imperialism reveals to us that the road to socialism is painted black. Today, we say that this new beginning marks our embarkation upon the final trek on a road leading to a new era of worldwide African revolution and the socialist unification of Africa and African people under the leadership of the African workers and poor peasants. Israeli to Africa. So that is chapter 8, the end of chapter 8. And we have space for discussion that I would like to utilize the maximum right now. I want to see who it is that we have. First of all, in this meeting, I have here Demetrius out of Nashville, Timba, Muteba, Penny, Kalambayi, Adisa, Fosia, Mike Love, K-Fing, Stephanie, Unique, Ruby, Star, Fofi. Who did I leave out? Elikia, how you doing?
I'm fine.
Splendid. Anybody else? Rafiq, Uhuru. Who is that? Who the hell? Oh, Verdoria? Okay. Anybody else? Who else? Is that Diane? Uhuru. Ntambwe. Who is that? Otika. Uhuru, come in. Anybody else? Didn't hear that. Who is that?
Uhuru, this is Rita from Portland, Oregon.
Rita from Portland, Oregon. Uhuru Rita. Anybody else?
Uhuru Gazi.
Gosh. You guys sound like he just came on. Ikenge. That was Ikenge just came on.
I was watching it and I don't know how to comment.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Okay. Let's go ahead and discuss the chapter. I'd be interested in how it was understood by everybody and what kind of interventions you'd be interested in making. Let's open it up. Uhuru, comrades. Deafening silence. So what do you think, Alikia?
You're on mute.
Unique.
Everybody on mute?
Okay.
We be heard.
Uhuru, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Who is this?
This is Alikia.
Oh, Uhuru. Yes, Alikia.
Yes, I just really wanted to appreciate the study, especially it reminds me of a conversation I had earlier this week about, I was speaking to somebody about capitalism, explaining how, you know, the birth of capitalism and how white people went from feudalism and we were the first capital. And they were trying to make capitalism seem like, oh, we can use it for a good thing, which made no sense to me. So I was trying to explain who Karl Marx was and stuff like that. But I have now a better way to even phrase what I was trying to explain to this person.
Uhuru. And the truth is, of course, is that generally speaking, capitalism was good for white people. Capitalism did raise white people out of a state of feudal despotism. poverty, disease, and what have you. But it came at the expense of the resources and freedoms of vast part of the planet Earth, and tremendous amount of wealth was transformed to capital in this process and enriched the entire the white world. I said entire white world, but that's a kind of overstate the significance, because the entire white world compared to the rest of the world was relatively small. And but that's how it came into existence, which is why the Marxists have been able to speak of capitalism as being progressive for human society. It was progressive for white people. It wasn't progressive for human society. Human society paid a horrible price for the advent of capitalism in the world. Anybody else? Yes, comrade.
Yeah, I think it's important, the part where you talked about the ASI no longer being a theoretical question, but being an organizational question. And I think comrades who are looking at the party's work, especially in South Africa, can see that it's no longer a theoretical question, but it is in fact an organizational question, and whether or not we're going to be able to see upon this crisis that capitalism is in, and bring the other question that is no longer a theoretical question either, building the party into fruition, both those things. So and like you said on the South Africa question, we were in that debate thick and thin to the end.
Yeah.
And we were almost isolated in this country for throwing down on Nelson Mandela and the ANC.
Yeah.
When the whole thing bourgeoisie and most so-called revolutionaries back to the ANC, and our argument then, like it is now, made sense. But yeah, the main point I want to make is that we've actually solved these problems of the revolution. Building this brand new communist international form of the ASI, and building an organization just to be the Socialist Party capable of overthrowing capitalism.
K-Fing, I never forget, you came from a meeting one day with the people who from Occupy Tanzania, ANC, PAC, and all these forces. I never forget, you said, if the ANC comes to power, we're going to be in worse trouble than we are with these white people in power. I'll never forget that, but it was true. And we understood this question a long time ago. And I just think it's really important for, people to have faith in the party in terms of our analysis. And we haven't just awakened one day and come up with some good ideas. We've been waging this struggle for a very long time. I also wanted to say this about the African Socialist International and about the African nation, and whether or not it's simply a pipe dream for reuniting Africa and African people as a single nation. And that too is a practical question, because even who defines the nations? Who says that we're a nation or not a nation? Except the people, and not just the people in general, but the most advanced leading forces in any population is that force that, or those forces that will determine what it is that will define what that reality is. That's why it's so important to have the party of the African working class and cadre who believe in uniting Africa and the African world, who on every front, every place in the African world are fighting for just that, not compromising on that question a single bit. Because what we're saying is that somehow we don't have the ability and the right to do it, but Mbeki and Zuma in South Africa do, or that these Cretans in Congo and currently, they do have that right to say that. I'm talking about these leadership forces that's been held up and propped up, generally speaking, by one or another arm of imperialism. We say that. We define that. I mean, white people come and carved up Africa in all these areas and then say, this is who you are today. We say, damn that. And that's why we have to have a revolutionary African party, and it's an African Socialist International fighting on every front in the African world to recapture Africa in the possession of the African people. And the only social force able to do that is the African working class. Because we have no stakes in these damn borders. We have no stakes in New York, or we have no stakes in Sudan as in terms of borders. We now have to define our own reality, and the most advanced sector of the population will do that. And the most advanced sector of the African working class is the sector of the population, the working class, and in its revolutionary party, the African People's Socialist Party, if we assume the responsibility of doing that. That's part of what we keep talking about. It's an organizational question. That's part of the struggle that we continue to make inside the party of forces who have been tasked with leading these committees, leading these structures, leading these institutions that we've created, because collectively, that's what's going to determine what Africa looks like, who is an African, who is not an African, and whether or not we're going to be free as a whole people. That's the thing. This is not play stuff that we're doing that, you just put a title on somebody and then that's it. And some people will make it, some people won't make it, because it is real, because the future of our people depend on it. And there's nothing sacred about any title, any post, any leading post, personnel. The thing is that whether or not we are functioning to carry out the task to unite our Africa and liberate our nation. And we are the ones who say that. And we have to have the vision and the willingness to do that. Have to have the ability to believe in it and fight for it tooth and nail, to live and die it. That's what we have to have the ability to do. Somebody else is about to say something. Uhuru.
This is Demetrius.
Yes, Demetrius.
Yes, and I like the way you talked about combating liberal imperialism, which is key, because a lot of warning signs are people tend to support the left and like international, as far as the UN running countries going into Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, and thinking there's some boogeyman out there that's going to get us, but really the boogeyman is the white man opposing their forces on us, and we keep supporting them. And re-education is definitely important, and not supporting these international institutions that are against us as a whole, like advocating drones and troops targeting assassinations, Guantanamo Bay. This is all of the left.
That's right. That's the left that we're looking at. And the left is doing that, and they will impose a neo-colonial solution. Even Trump will be open to a neo-colonial solution if he can forge it. I understand he's now meeting with Johnson from BET, so we don't know what that's going to result in, but Penny, you were about to say something.
Chairman, this is Penny, African People Solidarity Committee. I really appreciate this study, and I know this is the completion of this whole book, which has been very amazing. And I think that just having had the honor of being there through the 80s in Oakland, the Oakland years, and throughout, just to be able, to see in this book how the party was always clear about the revolutionary purpose of the African People's Socialist Party, even though neocolonialism was rising up in this time, and it was really going against the wind. And just as Kay Thing said, just intervening in the most serious and critical questions of the day when nobody else had any analysis, but also creating the organizational structure to carry out the revolution, even as even as the party and the African movement was reeling from the counterinsurgency. That despite that it was unpopular, or just that the party always had a clear knowledge that the African working class would rise up again to its revolutionary structure, and the party would be in place for this period that we see now. And everybody else, all other groups and organizations, were going off on other trajectories, even Obama, Jesse Jackson, everything else like that. The party was always totally clear. And that's why we can read something from 30 years ago and it makes sense as if it were written today. And I think that is just so powerful to see in this book as an example of that.
Oh, hold on. Yeah.
I have some questions from online.
I don't know if people can hear you.
Yeah, I have questions from online. We have from Facebook, Robert Vinny. Living in the U.S., how do we separate ourselves from the capitalist system? We have to work and eat. Where should we begin?
Well, we have to work and eat wherever we are. The whole world is affected by the capitalist system. There's no place on earth, from Russia, you name it, to Cuba. We all live in a capitalist world-dominated social system. And our responsibility is not to stop eating, but to eat as much as we can in the pursuit of the overthrow of capitalism. So we're not suggesting nobody should eat, but what we have done is try to create various kinds of institutions, economic institutions that people can work in, that are in contention with the capitalist structures that suck our blood. These are anti-colonial economic institutions that we have. You should buy an Uhuru pie, and that's sticking your finger in the eye of capitalism. Support an Uhuru institution. If you're in Florida, come and work out at the Uhuru's gym. If you're in Oakland or Philadelphia, come to and buy some furniture from the Uhuru furniture store. We create economic institutions exactly that are in contention. And this is what you see. And when you look at much of the warfare that the U.S. is making against peoples and countries around the world, is precisely because they are trying to extricate themselves from capitalist imperialist control and to exercise some kind of economic and political independence. That's what you and I have to do. And that has to be our strategic aim. That has to be what informs our political practice, as opposed to just doing any sort of thing. We are on a trajectory toward ending this relationship. That's what even the work that we do, creating the Fifth Ward garden in Houston, Texas, start growing our own food and just doing everything we can on every level to become less dependent on the structures, on the social system that sucks our blood. That's the kind of thing we do. But ultimately, all of this has to be geared toward overturning this system, because we have resources, we just can't access them because of the political and economic structures that white power has imposed on us in our lives, in our country. Uhuru. Our country in this instance, I mean Africa in particular, but I also mean it's true in the Bahamas, it's true throughout the Caribbean and various other places where we are located. Uhuru. Anybody else? You said there was more?
Yeah,
It's some on
can you
YouTube.
speak a little deeper on that? Because a lot of people will tell you if you start a business and you make a profit, then you are a capitalist. You know, that might have been where that question was coming from.
If you start a business and you make a profit, then you are a capitalist.
Yeah. Therefore, you cannot do without capitalism.
I'm sort of taken aback. Frankly, why don't you say more about that, K-Fan? Because
Listen,
go ahead.
We're making a profit off of selling time, but we're not capitalists.
We don't make profit. I mean, profit is a consequence of the exploitation of labor for the purpose of more exploitation. I mean, we do get more back from what it is that we produced and what went into it. But that goes back into the process of creating more value for our people. It's not something that's owned by an individual. It's not something that's owned by some kind of corporation that exploits the people. It is the people participating in this relationship with us, purchase from us. We take the resources that we get from that to create more resources for the people. Profit is something that is created for, that's exploitation. You take it and create value to make more value for the individual or the corporation that's separate and alienated from the people. So we can create these institutions and make money. The objective is to make money. And then sometimes we do that, and then we try to create other institutions. We try to, and part of it's not owned by any individual. It's owned by the people. It's owned by us. It's owned by the party, the movement, or some sector of the movement. It is an instance, more or less, in a very primitive state of the state owning and controlling the means of production, which is what socialism is in the real world, where the worker state owns and controls the means of production. That's what socialism is. It doesn't mean that nobody creates industry or anything like that. It means that ownership is in the hands of the working class, organized as a state. Uhuru. Timber, go ahead. I don't know if people can hear you,
yeah,
Timber.
We have some questions from YouTube. What is the nationality of the free African working class in the U.S.? African, question mark. What about IDs like driver's license and passports?
IDs and driver's license, stuff like that, no matter what they say, do not speak to the question of nationality. It speaks to, in the broadest sense of the word, to citizenship. Citizenship is something that's conferred by law. That is to say, whoever controls the law is the opinion of the ruling class. And so Africans were enslaved, captives in this country. Then we were supposed to be free, but freedom meant that the ones who still had the power, the state that had the power that enslaved us still had the power after slavery was officially over. And that state declared that we were then citizens. That state declared it. Africans didn't have anything to do with declaring whether we were citizens. They declared we were citizens. And so citizenship is something that's conferred on people by the state. And that is wherever that state is, that can confer citizenship and give you driver's license, passports, and stuff like that. But that's not the question of the nation. The nation is not, you can have a people and do have peoples around the world, and certainly that's true of Africans who constitute a nation, but do not have our own state power. State power, of course, is simply the organized capacity for coercion and being able to express the interests of the population that that state represents. That's why we can have, for example, a Black People's Grand Jury in Ferguson, Missouri, that overturned the verdict that the White People's Grand Jury, the legal state-created grand jury, did to look at the murder of Mike Brown, and that verdict by the bourgeois state said that Darren Wilson, the killer, didn't commit an offense that was indictable, but African people had our own Black People's Grand Jury and used the same evidence and came up with a different conclusion. And that was the beginning of creation of state power, but it's not complete state power, because if we had complete state power, then Darren Wilson would be probably facing a firing squad by now. So the achievement of state power is a primary goal of an oppressed nation of people, to have state power, to remove ourselves from the influence of the imperialist state. And in the strictest sense of the word, in the struggle for democracy that we talk about all the time, say the highest expression of democracy is self-determination. In the strictest sense of the word, the struggle for democracy is to impose limitations on the ability of the colonial bourgeois state to impose its will on our people. to the extent that we can do that, then we have more or less democratic space than before. Uhuru. You were about to say something, Penny, in terms you had a question or something there? Timber, is that it?
I'm looking, I don't see.
So is there anything else, brothers and sisters?
I got one more. No, this is the same question. No, that's it.
Anything else, brothers and sisters?
Uhuru, Chairman.
Oh, this is,
Go ahead.
I wanted to just speak to
Who is this?
the idea about, this is unique.
Yes, Unique.
I wanted to speak to this idea of, the notion of building party and how important I'm realizing it is. Because it seems that, for those who refuse to build party, what you do is even if you get some short-term victory, you leave the masses of the people defenseless. Because, you don't just win a victory and get a trophy and go home. Imperialism continues to fight. And so without party, the people have no instrument, even after a victory, to continue to defend whatever gains they have made.
Wow. I think that's important. And I think that in my own political history, as an example, has, started off, I guess, like with many people, with protest this, protest that, and with organized capacity protests at the drop of a hat. But at some point, one has to come to understand that we have to organize for the capture of political power and the ability to wield political power. We have to capture and wield political power. That's what the struggle has to be. And the highest instrument for waging the struggle for power is the political party. And the political party is an organization that represents, that is representative of the advanced class sector of a particular class. All parties represent a particular class. And the Democratic and Republican Party, as quiet as it's kept, while people might call the Democratic Party the Republican Party used to call it the White People's Party, still do, I guess. Soon you're going to be calling the Democratic Party the White People's Party, because now they see that their era, that's what they're expressing, is not, they deserted the white workers, and so now they got to go and organize the white working class. But the point is that it's not the whiteness that makes it significant, is the fact that it is an instrument of the ruling class, the white ruling class. And because even the Democratic Party, of 25% of the membership of the base of the Democratic Party is Africans. We're going to see how that look over the next several years, because they should be in their own damn party, which is a revolutionary organization. But so, yeah, you have to have a party. You have to have ability and a plan, tactics, and strategies to take power. And then you have to have the capacity to wield power after it's taken, and a party is the best instrument that's been conceived up to now to do that. Uhuru. Anybody else?
Yes, Chairman Diane. That same question came up. I had that same question a few times, and recently in a meeting, it turned into this huge discussion or struggle about if we have businesses that were capitalist, right? So I just wanted to see if you could run that by me one more time. I had said that, well, if we just people having a small business or something.
It's not just that. Do you call the Cuban industry capitalist? Cuba has a society that has the best hospitals, doctors. In fact, the doctors in this country are lining up to try to get to Cuba now that there's been some kind of rapprochement, because they want to learn what the hell the Cubans are doing. They turn out more doctors in Cuba than any place, a tiny island like that, able to send 20,000 doctors into Venezuela and to other places where people want them to go. You know why Cuba can do that? Because the Cuba does have industry that's owned and controlled by the people through the state, through the people's state. It's not a perfect society. It's not a perfect state or anything like that. But you can't call them capitalists. But you know why? Because now they got free education. You know how they get free education? Because the resources that would have gone to some corporation or some individual goes to the people. That's what the people in power, that's what socialist state is all about. So we are creating our own economy. We are struggling to initiate our own economy. That means we take these resources, we put them into the revolution. No individual is getting fat off anything that we do. No corporation that is there for profit of anything that we do. All of these resources go back into the struggle, go back into creating the means, a gym. We got a gym, a fitness center in St. Petersburg, Florida, that we've been carrying for I don't know how many years, that it doesn't make any money. But money we make in other institutions can go there so black people can have their own gym and their own community, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's not profit. That's not capitalism. That's absolutely different from capitalism. The capitalist would not even be operating. If it doesn't make profit, it doesn't operate, because profit is something, again, that goes to particular individuals, corporations, et cetera, for the purpose of making more capital, creating more capital to do more exploitation. That's not what we're about at all. Is that helpful at all, Diane?
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. I just wanted, to kind of help you.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, and basically, I said like that capitalism is like when I probably said like an abstract way, but it's like, it's not like we have massive amounts of capital accumulated from exploiting people for hundreds. We have
no money accumulated from exploiting people. None, not massive, none from accumulated. And the resources that we get go back to the people.
Right.
Yeah.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, uhuru. Yes, come on.
Chairman, this is Otika.
Yes, Otika.
I want to appreciate the political summing up of everything that we've seen with the election. In a Sunday teaching, I do want to ask though. I've noticed. Okay, so I've been added onto this group of Africans on the continent, specifically in Tanzania, and a lot of them are students. And I've noticed a lot of times they want to have a conversation about what's going on in the world, but aren't really interested in joining the conversation and struggling to take over, take power, and really have a revolution. Like a lot of them are almost seem like they're petty bourgeoisie, and they have no concern for the people. I was wondering if you could speak to that. I know you spoke about a while ago. You spoke about the importance of struggling for students and struggling for students to join the revolution. I just kind of wanted to hear more about that and how that could happen.
I want to say a couple of things about that. Those students in occupied Tanzania are not different fundamentally from students you'll find in New York or any other place where African students are. That for most of us, education has been seen as a means not to make a revolution or to help the people, but as a means of advancing, as a means by which one climbs from the lowly station of being an African worker, a peasant, and something like that, to the station of the petty bourgeoisie or the ruler of the new state. That's what people go to school for. You will very seldom, even though you hear people, I want to go to be a doctor so I can help cure the sick and shit like that. In capitalist society, you go to become a doctor to make money. That's the way it works, notwithstanding any, how do you call it, altruistic motives that might influence you as a child when you talk about that. So when you're talking to students in Tanzania, it's not like the students that you talk to right there in New York or that you talk to in Philadelphia, any other place that we're located. They have come there for that purpose, and many of them have a callous attitude because students are seduced by these sterile institutions where every question is turned into an abstraction, where poverty doesn't exist in the real world. It's a concept now as opposed to reality that we are confronted with on a daily basis because that's the way the whole thing has been created. But there are among the students, and particularly at certain times in certain places, when it becomes clear that the education has not led people, will not present what you assumed it was going to present, that your way forward, which is what all humans want to do, find a way to improve their lot, and sometimes to improve their lot of their parents and their community. You can't do it through the capitalist process, and therefore many of them are open to ideas about socialism and revolution, etc. And you might not find that, you won't find that too often among sectors of the population who themselves may be tied to the neo-colonialists who are in power. They don't expect Mbeki's children to embrace that. And even I've seen where even children of people who we've considered to be revolutionary have embarked on this capitalist road once it was available to them. So what I'm saying is that what we do is that we cast a net to try to capture those forces who are different. Like we work very closely right now. We have the party that's existing in South Africa, in occupied Tanzania right now, and they are not those students. And in fact, some of them are struggling with some of the ideas that students, bring with them that you're talking about. So what we have to do is to try to bring these people to organizations, bring them to the African Socialist International. If they're in occupied Tanzania and they are really interested in something, then we bring them to organizations. If they're not interested, if it's clear to us, if it becomes clear that it's just a chat that they want, it's a waste of time. And we have to discover those people who do want revolutionary transformation, because everybody is not going to want to make the revolution just because they're African. Some people will look for solutions within the capitalist system, even as the house is burning down all around them. They will continue to look until it's too late to do anything else. So my answer is that you should do everything you can to bring them to the African Socialist International. When it's clear that they cannot be brought into that process, it's a waste of time unless you're just lonely and don't have somebody to chat with. And if you're lonely and don't have somebody to chat with, pick up a stack of burning spears and hit the streets with them. You engage in much better discussions than you will with people like that. I want to thank everybody for coming on to the study. I want to just make sure who's in the study, because I want to make a couple of really important announcements, so don't go anywhere. But what I have here is Demetrius, Timba, Muteba, Penny, Kalambayi, Adisa, Fosia, Mike Love, and not War, Kafing, Stephanie, Unique, Ruby, Star, Fofi, Alikia, Rafik, Bedoria, Diane, Tambwe, Oteka, Rita, Gazi, Ikenge. Is there somebody whose name I did not call?
Yes, Yao, Chairman.
Who?
Yao.
Y'all. Philly, y'all?
Chairman.
All right. Who else? Uhuru, come in. Oh, is that it? Okay. Listen, there are a couple of really important things that's before us right now. And the accomplishment of these tasks will play an extraordinarily important role in building our party and forwarding the revolution. The first of these things is that from January 7th through the 9th, the party is having a plenary here in St. Petersburg, Florida. And it's happening under the theme of putting revolution back on the agenda. It's a really important thing, and people will be coming here from throughout the US, and I'm hoping that our forces will be coming from Europe and other places as well. And it's a critical kind of discussion because of what we see happening in the world today has placed the potential for revolution probably on a faster track than what we've seen in our lifetime. And I just think it's going to be important for people to get here so that we can equip ourselves more effectively to go out and advance this revolutionary project. It's clear that these are extraordinarily volatile, and I believe it is a period that's pregnant with revolution. So the other thing is on January 14th, the Black is Back Coalition is conducting a rally in Washington, D.C., the capital. This is 6 days before the inauguration of Donald Trump. It's 1 day before the anniversary of the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King. And we want to have at least 5,000 people out to that action. It is happening, it is being characterized as a rally for self-determination, hashtag Black is Back. But we think it's going to be extremely important because so many African people have been actually disarmed and demoralized by the fact that Hillary Clinton lost that election. We have depended on the Democratic Party and Clinton, and a lot of people were not. There are a lot of Africans who they characterize as millennials who said a pox on both your houses, to both Clinton and to Trump. There are 100 million people who didn't vote at all, and not through ignorance. I'm sure of that. In fact, the Trump was an election of the person most despised by white people than any president in the history of this country. And he was only despised by white people by about a percentage point more than Hillary Clinton was despised by white people. There are people who need answers and they won't find them. And we'll have competition because I've heard lately that this man, Al Sharpton, is having a demonstration on the same day. And I think that's meaningful. And I think that it gives us an opportunity to build a mobilization that people, African workers, can be clear. African people can be clear. Is a contest between Sharpton, the shill for the Democratic Party, and a real movement for self-determination. And the only way that's going to be significant is that if we do the work, because the Democratic Party is going to provide him buses, and they're going to provide him media, and all kinds of other things to make sure that he can preempt a struggle by our people to achieve our own self-determination, our own kind of movement. So I want everybody to be alerted to this. By Monday, before tomorrow is over, the Black is Back Coalition website will be redesigned, re-upped to promote more effectively the January 14th mobilization. But this is something you can begin to spread now. There's an article on theburningspear.com. I think it may be up on the Black is Back Coalition.org right now, but there's an article on the call for the mobilization for January 14th. Share it. Send it out to everybody who you know and get them to send it out. We want to overwhelm this ability by Sharpton to control this discussion and determine what people are going to be doing. The issue is before us is whether the anniversary of Martin Luther King is going to be a celebration of the inauguration of Donald Trump, a celebration of the last gasp of the neo-colonial sector tied to the Democratic Party, whether it's going to be representative of a real struggle for self-determination. That's a decision that we can make, that we have to make. So within the next 2 days, we'll be notifying everybody what we'll be doing for next Sunday in terms of the study. We get the materials out to you. So let's go ahead and what are you saying? What was the one more question? What is the question?
What is the African People's Socialist Party position on solidarity with parties such as Workers' World and PSL?
We can have solidarity we can certainly have a relationship with any organization that's willing to support, the stance for self-determination of African people. In fact, PSL-led and highly influenced organization ANSWER I'm discussing with them right now about participation in whatever they do on Inauguration Day, and them promoting the actions that we're going to be doing on the 14th. So, I mean, we've never been opposed to working with any group, and any group that can unite with the struggle that African people are engaged in for the total liberation, unification of Africa, for the advent of.
Sorry. You can't start out.
Please mute.
Oh, look, I almost put your cheers on.
Please mute.
Please mute.
Whoever's talking.
All right, so hopefully that's it. So yeah, I mean, we can work with anybody who can with these principles. Our view, however, is this, and I want to be clear on this, is that we see that the genuine struggle for a socialist revolution that people say they want to wage inside this country requires an assault on the pedestal upon which the whole capitalist enterprise rests. And that means the slavery and colonialism of Africans, Mexicans, and indigenous peoples. And that's where the center and strategic center of this whole revolutionary process is located. We say strategic center, we don't mean that white people who recognize how important this is and find it upon themselves to bring their genius to us. We say that strategic center means that those forces should work under the leadership of the African and Mexicans and indigenous revolution. But everybody's not going to do that. We say they should be working in the African People's Solidarity Committee, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. Everybody's not going to do that. So we believe the best of those forces, the ones who will share the maxim of Che Guevara in terms of sharing the same fate, whether in victory or death, that's APSC. There's no doubt in our minds about that. But it doesn't mean that we won't work with some other group recognizing the limitations of the relationship. So, is there any, I think we should go ahead and free people up, and again, put on your calendar, if it's not already there, it should already be there, January 7th through 9th, the plenary, putting revolution back on the agenda, and also January 14th. And I know it's going to be a lot of work because we're asking people to come here on the 7th and then on the 9th, and then just 5 days later to be in Washington, D.C. The best way to do that is to do it. And what we are promoting right now is to have our bus for the January 14th, 50-seat bus for January 14th, coming out of St. Petersburg. We have that paid for within 2 weeks of today. Have that paid for, so that's a thing that we don't have to worry about anymore. And then all of our other resources, go to wherever else they need to be. And that's how people will have to play it and have to really build. And you can't do it if you're a candy ass. You have to be really serious and dig in to make this happen. But if we do this, we will have really created a whole new course of struggle inside this country, which means that we will impact on what struggle looks like throughout the world. Thank you, comrades, brothers and sisters. 2 days from now, you should have information on what we're going to be dealing with next Sunday, and which will happen again at 8 o'clock. Uhuru.